So if we were going to be following this patient up, we would go to, since we're in examination, we would go to New. And you can see the date, the time, device. These are the devices we have at the Woodland. You can tell it what you're doing, don't need to. The operator is just what you're logged in as. And then you want to hit save and start examination. And then again, defaults are C-curve 7.7. Now at this point things start looking very familiar. Well, the acquisition module is running while the power's on, the control panel works. Anything that's blue is active, so my internal fixation target's on. Generally I'm going to drop down to 50% on the IR intensity. That's just how bright the IR light is on the inside. Now if I'm doing an FA-ICG, I have to turn off OCT. And that'll get the ICGA option to pop up. You'll notice that this selection entirely changes based on if that's on or not. I can do ICGA with OCT, but I can't do FA with ICG unless I turn that OCT off. And then you can go into here, and when you're on that, the camera changes sound, but you also get dual images. This will be your FA and this will be your ICG. Since it's using an IR light for the ICG, it says the IR autofluorescence and blue autofluorescence. If you're not using dye, if you're just getting baseline images, this will be your infrared autofluorescent image, which shows up a little bit more challengingly than the autofluorescence does, but that's the layout there. When we're on the FA-ICG, you hit inject, acquire, finish injecting, acquire, switch to Movie Max, and now your timer's going and your video is ready. And when you see the dye show up, you just hit acquire. You get your movie building. You can see how many images it takes. When you're performing fluorescein angiogram, you'll just have this selected, and you notice that the option here goes away. It's because we're not using the infrared channel. And also you get the option for high res. When you're under the combination, even though it's high res there, it actually only gives you a high speed resolution. So we saw that it said high res, and there it's high speed, there it's high speed, and if you look at that little error window, if I change this, if I try to change it here, it's unable because it's not available in simultaneous video mode. I'll bring that up again. So even though it said on the control panel that's on high resolution, it's actually on high speed. And that it's a technicality that plays into the image size on the files, but because it's on high speed, it's able to shoot at the same speed as it would on high res if you were doing just FA or just ICG. It's just the resolution is not the same. While we're on here, when you've got this up, okay, yeah, I can make this control panel go auto. I would never do that because I don't like how their auto is set up. But you can actually make it to where your camera starts at a negative So right now my focus is positive 1. I hit that button and it goes to negative 4.75, but you also see it says ml. And I switched it to the negative 12 diopter and went to that negative 10. Now with my focus, all of a sudden I can take that negative 10 and go all the way to negative 26. It will not let you do this while you have the camera on OCT. See, I switched it to OCT. If I try to put IR on, my optic lens setting must be set to 0. So even though I can technically have it on, when I switch the mode to IR OCT, that error comes up. So if I go back to here, tell it my optic lens 0, all of a sudden, works like a charm. So the only time that you can use this is when you're getting a fundus image, and that includes your fluorescein angiography and the indocyanine green angiography. If you've got somebody with a very myopic lens, it can be helpful. If you have somebody with a very myopic eye, it can be helpful. It's not necessarily something you use every day, but knowing it's there can be helpful. When you're getting an FA, or rather FA-ICG, you can still go between individual light sources. So you can go to the just FA, you can go to just ICGA. You'll notice you still get your IR intensity options for the ICG. So if you have a little bit of, or a lot of dye all collected together and not really diffused out, then you might need to be down at 50% to get the brightness right between the ICGA and the FA. And then as that becomes more diffuse, you may have to increase to 75 or 100. Sometimes when you're on the FA-ICGA, the FA image is going to be too bright and the ICGA image is going to be a little too dark. What I like to do when it does that, I'll get a picture with the two as balanced as I can, then I'll get an FA image, get it at the right brightness, because I can still go in and adjust the sensitivity. Even though I can adjust the brightness, I can adjust the sensitivity. See that number dialing here? This is how sensitive that camera is. And then I can go to ICGA, where I still have that sensitivity, but I also have the brightness options. So you can get single images at a better exposure sometimes, if your combined image isn't showing exactly what you want. Another function while we're here, if I hit MovieMax twice, I get into this section where I can look at MovieMax, tomography, mean, composite, 3x3, composite, stereo pair. If I switch to this composite, it'll let me do a video where I kind of pan around and you get a equivalent of a montage. I prefer not doing that. What I would use this for particularly is the stereo pair. It's actually very simple. You just select that, and then when you have your image lined up, you move the joystick. If this is your image lineup right here, you move your joystick literally just a little bit, come back, hit acquire, see it switches to stereo right. So if this was perfectly lined up when we were in the middle, I'd just go back a little to the right, and then it defaults back to stereo. So to get it to come back to normal, you go back to max and tell it okay, and it goes back to what it was before. You can get stereo in any of the modalities except for the OCT. Now if you you needed to get an OCT while you're performing one of these dye tests, you can always go in, select what you wanted, and your normal OCT options pull up. So you can select BK if we want, position it where you want. If you need to adjust the frames, you can, but this whole time the dye is going and the bright light is on to excite the dye. So when you're doing this, try to, for the patient's sake, not take the frames up to a crazy level, and the high speed is probably nicer, just because it's going to be a quicker scan for the patient, so they're not getting too blinded.